Hello! Today we're going to talk about what a costume designer is and what they do. Now, I may or may not have told you by now that that's what I did professionally for several years. I was a professional costume designer. I've designed in Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, Maryland, and it's brought me so much joy and adventure and exhilaration. But the job has a lot of components to it, and so today we're going to talk a little bit about what those components are. The first thing a designer does when they get the job, because you do have to get the job every time, you have to apply, you go through interviews, you show the work you've already done, and then you either get hired for a project or not. Now, when you get hired for a project, they'll send you the script because you can't design a show if you've never read it. So the first thing you do is you read the script. You read this script just to enjoy it, just to see what it's like. You read it like you would a book, except for instead of long paragraphs that describe what the character is thinking or what the setting is and how it looks or what they're doing, you get to picture it in your mind as you read what the characters say. And the characters describe what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And there is some action described in scripts, such as Catherine walks to the window, but mostly you visualize it in your mind in the same way that you would see it on the stage. Now, after you've read the script and you have a pretty good idea of what you're working with, you've already done some preliminary work, getting to know the characters really well and the setting and the plot, you meet with the director. Who's the director? The director is the person hired for this project who makes sure that every single part of the play is cohesive. It works together in harmony and it'll look great on stage. Their vision for the show is what every designer, costumes, sets, light, sound, every technician who helps bring those designs to life, every performer, choreographer, stage manager, it's what all these people who collaborate to make the show come to life, it's what they follow, is the director's concept for the show. And every director will bring their own concept to a show. So it's really important as a designer to be able to work with a multitude of people because you will be working with all those people and the people will be different for every single project that you work on. So you meet with the director. They tell you their concept for the show, how they want the audience to feel, what they think the theme is. If there's any little bits of symbolism or dialogue or action of the play that the director really wants to come across really strongly for the audience. So as the costume designer, or really any designer, you sit and you take notes. At this point, it's really good to ask questions. It's really good to put forth your own ideas to see if your ideas and the director's ideas go together really well, if they're unified, or if the director wants you to make different ideas, new ideas, more ideas, in order to better fit your costumes in with the rest of the show. Now, it's important to remember that the director's vision is law. So if you've read the play and you think, oh my gosh, I know exactly who these characters are, I know exactly how I want them to look, and you've already done all of your design work and then you meet with the director may tell you no, that is not the direction we're going on for this show. And as the designer, it's your job to say, okay, and to put aside all those things you already did to talk about the director's concept. Because if your designs don't fit with the rest of the director's concept, they're going to look really out of place and probably pretty weird. So you've met with the director. You've gotten their insights and their theme and everything that they think the show is about. Then what do? You start designing. You sit down and you do a bunch of thumbnail sketches. And you do several thumbnail sketches for each costume. You say, well, maybe in this one I want big sleeves. Maybe in this one I want a poofy skirt. Maybe this gentleman I want to be very straight and very tall. I wonder what it would look like if he was actually shorter and wider. And you make all of these different drawings. Now, it's important to realize these drawings aren't just from your own imagination. The information that you use to base your renderings off of have to come from the script. which means you have to have analyzed the script really well. You have to know the characters, know who they are, their personalities and their objectives, what they want. You have to know which characters are related to which characters and how their relationships should look on stage. You do this through analyzing them by asking those questions: who they are, what purpose do they serve the script, um, what should the audience automatically know about them as soon as they step on stage, how do they change throughout the story. All of these are really good questions, and we'll go into those later on this week. But you use these analysis of the play and the analysis of every character in combination with what you've already learned about the elements of design to create these drawings, patterns and lines and textures and all these drawings for these different characters. Then you settle on the ones you like. Oh, well, I like that this drawing, this character has poofy sleeves. And on this drawing, they have a belt around their waist. And so I'm going to combine these two things into a different drawing, which are your rough drafts. Your rough drafts should look exactly like how you want your costumes to actually look, but usually you don't actually paint them yet. You don't put color to them because they can change. You take these rough drafts and you bring them to your director and you talk over them together. And the director goes, oh, yeah, I like this, or I'm not sure I like this. And you talk with the director and you work and you change your rough drafts up to meet the director's vision. Again, you can put in all this work and be really married to your ideas, which means you feel really strongly about them and you feel like they are the ideas that should go on stage. But unless your director feels the same way, you have to bend to what the director wants. That means there has to be a lot of humility in a designer. You have to understand that your work is precious and it's wonderful and it's important, but it could all change at any time. And so you have to be willing to let your work go and create new work to better fit the needs of the play and the needs of your director and this particular production. After the director okays your roughs, you will color them according to the fabrics that you've chosen with the director, and then they are your working renderings. They're beautiful, they're in full color, they look a lot like this, or this, or this. Now, once your renderings are finalized, these are the renderings that you give your director. You say, this is what the show's going to look like. And they say, yes, yes, it is. And then they show them to the actors, the performers, because the performers really need to know what they're going to be working with. Are they going to be working with a big, huge skirt? They need to know that because it's going to affect the way they move around the stage. It's going to affect how close they can get to other people, right? Is this performer going to be working in a very, very tight fitting outfit? Because if they are, they need to know that. That means bending is going to be really difficult for them. That's going to inspire the way that they move, the way they sit and they stand. So the performers see the renderings, your director has the renderings, and almost the most important thing, the costume shop has the renderings. So it's not just the designer most of the time in the costume department. You also have a costume shop manager. You have cutters and drapers who actually make the patterns and put them together for your clothing. You have stitchers who sew it all together. You have craftspeople who make necklaces and tiaras and armor and bags and leather goods and all the cool things that isn't just fabric and thread. You have dressers that help the performers get in and out of costume when it comes time for them to actually wear it. You have all these people that you work with in the theater, and it's important that they know what the finished costume is supposed to look like. Because if they don't know what your finished costume is supposed to look like, how do they know what to create? So your renderings also serve as technical drawings for the shop so that they can create what you see in your head and what you have put on paper. Now, you have a big part in this too. I've been in costume shops where it was literally just me just me. So I was the designer, I was the cutter draper, I was the shopper, I did everything, just me. Now, those shows, thankfully, are few and far between because they are crazy. But you also get the most authority over your work. If a costume doesn't look exactly like how you want it to, that's on you. And you don't have to worry about other people not doing the work exactly the way you want it. But it is a lot of work for you. I personally love to work in shops where I work with a bunch of other people and we're all working together to create the look. But even in those times, the designer still has a lot to do. We go shopping for the fabrics that we want, or we at least pick them out. Sometimes you have another person that is their job is to go shopping, but you have to pick out what they're going to buy. You pull costumes. So if it's a theater that has done a lot of shows before, they're going to have a lot of costumes in storage from all those other shows. Now, it's much easier, most of the time, to take a costume that already exists and then tweak things and adapt it a little bit to make it what you want. And when you do that, it's called pulling. You go and you pull the old costume so that you can make it into a new costume. Um, there's been times when even with a big costume shop, I've still wanted to make a very specific costume piece if it's one that I really like and that I wanted to be able to say, I created that one. I've built a costume piece, and a lot of designers do this, depending on how big the show is and if they have time. Then, once the costumes are made, or even in the process of making them, you have fittings. Fittings are where performers come into the costume shop and the costume shop has them put on the clothes, the costumes, and you make sure they fit really well because you want them to look really, really nice on stage. So maybe they're a little too big and you'll put in some pins. And you'll be like, we need to take in the side seams, right? Which just makes the side seams smaller. Or maybe the costume is too small. And so you're like, we need to let out the seams, right? Which means make the costumes overall a little bigger. Or maybe the neckline looks a little weird, and so you need to fix that. And we do this in fittings. In fittings is also where we communicate with the performers exactly what limitations this costume is going to create. For example, sometimes the arm side, the part of your shirt where the body of the shirt meets the sleeve, sometimes, especially in some period pieces, which means pieces from history, right? The arm's eye comes down onto the shoulder, which means you can't raise your arm up very far. So if they are in a, let's say, 1850s outfit, they're not going to be able to raise their arms more than just right here. And that's really important for the performer to know. Again, so they realize how that's going to affect their movement on stage. Now is a good time where you talk about why you chose the pattern that you did, or the fabric, or the lace, or the trim, or the buttons. And you talk about the psychology of the character, which you did in your character analysis. And you talk about that psychology with the performer so that they can either opt to include that in the way they perform the character or not. For example, if I have designed a dress with a lot of lace and ruffles on it, because I feel like the character is very feminine and sort of flowy and flirty, then I tell that to the performer. I say this is going to have a lot of lace, a lot of ruffles, and this is why. And the performer can choose to take what I feel of the character and incorporate that into their performance. So maybe they, move their shoulders around a little bit more so that the lace and the ruffles sort of float and flutter. Maybe they become a little bit more flirtatious on stage. It's a give and it's a take. Or they can tell me their opinion. Oh, really? I don't feel like my character would be that flirty because of blah, 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 blah. And I can go, oh, you know what? I'm going to think on that and maybe I'll incorporate it and maybe I won't put as many ruffles. Of course, that's a decision that I'm going to have to talk with the director about. Now, usually the director has given us their vision of the character. So my vision of the character and the performer's vision of the character should both be inspired by the director's vision of the character. So they shouldn't be that far off from one another. Normally it goes, I gave them lace and ruffles because they're fun and flirty. And the performer goes, oh yeah, they are. Oh, I'll use that. and it works like a charm. So fittings can be really fun, but you are in an enclosed place with someone and you do have to touch them because you have to touch their costumes and bring it in or put pins someplace or tack things on. So you have to be able to talk with people and be really comfortable around them. Now, once the fittings have taken place and the costumes are completely built and finalized, you have what's called dress rehearsal. Now, this is where the designer and the dressers, remember the people who are actually helping the characters, the performers, get in and out of their clothes backstage. They go and the designer watches and the dressers help for the first time. These dress rehearsals, this is the first time that these performers have been in costume on stage, so they're usually a little rough. But the designer sits and they take notes. Oh no, she has to do all this running up and down stairs. She can't have a skirt on that's that long. She'll trip on it. Of course, again, this is something that you and the director should have talked about beforehand. But sometimes things fall through the cracks. Ooh, I didn't realize that when that performer hits his knees, like goes down into a kneeling position, that he actually slides across stage. That is going to wear out the knees of his pants. I'm going to have to reinforce them with some heavier duty fabric behind it so that they don't get holes and so that the audience doesn't see these ripped pants on stage. Okay. Or, the set designer didn't let me know that the walls were going to be that color of green, which they should have. But sometimes it falls through the cracks. So the set designer didn't tell me that the walls are going to be that color of green. I made the lead actor suit that color of green, and now you can't really see him because they're the two same colors, and so I have to figure out what to do. Either the set designer is going to have to paint the wall a different color, or I'm going to have to figure out some way to change the color of the suit. Okay, all these things, you take notes, you talk with them about them with the director gives you new notes, you go back and you hurry and you fix all the things that you need to fix before the next dress rehearsal the next day. And then once all the dress rehearsals are over, and there's anywhere between like 3 and 5 dress rehearsals, then the show opens. And as the designer, your work is done. It's done. You can go to the shows if you want. Most of us do not, because we are on to the next project. We are on to the next design, maybe in the next state. Who knows? But that sort of is an abbreviated version, which I know seemed really long, an abbreviated version of what a costume designer does. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know. Bye.